Eat more chips, don't let the salad win. That's the message in terms of nature of the food maybe that we consume in Wales.
Oh, in Wrexham town they say there's a team that likes to play association football with precision. On the terraces they call, come on Nixie, hit that ball, and we're off to the second division. Oh, let's see the Reds with me, and you will swear that you have seen a vision. Top of Division 3, led by Arno Litti, we're off to the second
Hello and welcome to the Eat More Chips podcast, the official podcast, one of the most recognisable flags in the Welsh football supporters universe. In a week when an Alaska woman had her massive mouth measured and broke a Guinness World Record, Ketchikan resident Marie Pearl Zelma Robinson said she always knew she had a large mouth, but hadn't considered what might be a world record until she saw a video of the previous record holder, Samantha Ramsell, whose mouth gape was measured at 2.56 inches in 2021. I just watched the video a few times. I'm like, oh, that's funny. I could fit that kind of stuff in my mouth too. Hey, I wonder if I could beat her. Robinson told Guinness World Records. Robinson's dentist measured her mouth gape at 2.98 inches, earning her the title for the largest mouth gape bracket female. Not sure why my two colleagues weren't measured. Two bigger, more welcoming gobs you couldn't find on the planet. And you can read that in the gents' toilets at the Stoke Kairos. It's Jamie and Daz.
I mean, he
Why
did.
does
He
that
did
tickle
say
you so much?
he did say we were less likely to find it funny than him, and he's right. Oh dear, mate!
It's just her saying, "Her, that's funny. I could fit that kind of stuff in my mouth too." That's just what cracked me up. Oh my goodness me! Oh, I needed that after the match last week. Jamie, we'll talk about the spectacle that was Wigan game in a minute. But it didn't escape notice for many people that Paul Mullin was in the away stand with the Wrexham fans on Saturday with the documentary film crew in tow. Were you surprised to see him not with the team if he was attending the match anyway?
We've discussed this to death in recent weeks, haven't we? Should he be involved? Shouldn't he be involved? The general consensus is he should. Interesting that he was in the crowd. It's always interesting. It's always in many ways it's always a good thing when you see one of your own players in amongst the fans. And from what I hear, he got absolutely bombarded with. There was a queue for people wanting selfies with him, and he obliged everybody, which is just a testament to the type of person he is, isn't he? I mean, we know he's such a down to earth chap, which I think is why. Apart from what he's done on the football pitch, I think it's why he resonates with the Wrexham fan base so much. But yeah, it's like you say. We'll talk about the game in a minute, but when you see what happened on the pitch, it is a really, really tough one to understand why he is stood in the stands and not somewhere involved at some point. You just can't help but think that he has something to offer. Given that, what we're seeing on the pitch.
I mean, he was where I was sitting. He was behind me and up towards the back in the far corner. And absolutely, when word got out, first of all, a huge number of people suddenly started turning around and before the game and was looking to that corner. And then there were rumours already that he was in the ground anyway. And then, as I say, during half time, there were queues of people going all the way down the stands. And he obliged everybody. He took a selfie with everybody. And you can imagine how many people said to him while they were taking the selfie, "You should be on the field. You should be on the field."
It must be such a difficult situation for him. This must be killing him these last few months, or this season as a whole must be killing him, because we know how much Wrexham means to him and how much it's become a big part of his life. And regardless of the football inside of it, which obviously is a big part of it. You know, he has cemented himself in legendary status amongst the Wrexham fans forever. Just if he never kicks a ball for Wrexham again. But it's sad to see, it's sad to see how things are kind of playing out for him. But it must be killing him. It really must be killing him. But
I'm still confused. I mean, obviously, we don't know any of the details about the whys behind any of this. Still, I'm guessing it's just that even if you're not in the matchday squad, if he's travelling, wouldn't the club want him there anyway? It's those bits of the in between bit where you've got not needed in the team on the pitch. That's a playing decision. I can live with that. But then being free and available and was in the ground as a travelling fan, some isn't he beneficial somewhere in the setup, even in a travelling,
I want to
support
know how he
team?
got a bloody ticket.
I think if you're Paul Mullin, I think you can get a ticket. I don't think to be honest. I
No,
mean, interestingly, obviously the documentary film crew with him. Do you think that had something to do with it?
Yeah, but surely that in itself is going to be such a horrible situation for him to be in. Can you imagine the producer knocking on, giving him a text saying, "Listen, I know you're not going to be in the matchday squad and you're not going to be involved, but any chance of you going and being with the fans and we'll come and film you?" I mean, I don't know if that's how it's played out, but if that is the driver behind it, then fair play to him to have played along with that. Because again, I can't imagine that's going to have been a nice scenario for him to have been in. Like you say, every one of those fans that would have queued up to take a picture with him is probably 99.9% of them have all asked him the same question about what's going on, why you're not involved, and I'm sure he's given an answer, but what I'm guessing it's nothing controversial. It'd have been all over social media.
Daz, let's put the shoe on the other foot. With all the chatter around Paul at the moment, as you say, we're not quite sure what's going on. How do you think Phil Parkinson would feel about him being in the stand with the fans when he's not in the matchday squad?
Well, how would he feel? I mean, obviously, he knows it's going to be contentious. He knows it's going to draw attention away from the pitch. And there's a concern that you don't want your fan base completely split between what's in front of them and who's behind them. But he's got no say. If he's not going to pick him, he's not working that day. It's his day off. I mean, short of forcing him to go and train with the kids or something somewhere back at home, because I know that some squads, larger squads, certainly Prem teams, if you're not in the travelling team, you're still training. There's still a team working with you back so that you're staying fit or getting fitter or whatever it is. So he was obviously not required at the workplace, so off he went, and he's a fan. So I don't know. I mean, it's not helpful, but there's nothing you can do about it, I don't think.
I mean, obviously, we're getting to a crunch time of the season now. Is this an unwanted distraction for Phil, or do you think he's just kind of, I'd shut it out?
Well, he's done a really good job of shutting it out so far. So I don't think he's you're still in a position where you've got a promotion chance is still on the cards, whatever happens, whether it's automatic or whether it's playoff. But he's got you to that point with all of this chatter in the background already. Another week of it probably washes right off him. I just think if there was something he could do, though, to quash it, to stop it, to at least deflect it away from him or the team or the current situation, he'd have said something by now. If he's saying he's not fit, I just don't think I can trust him to play at the moment, then that would stop everybody guessing. It's all the guessing that's going around it that's not helpful. But no, I think Parky's obviously made some decisions. He's sticking by it. We know he's stubborn, or at least forthright in his decision making, and is not swayed very easily. Then I think to answer your question, I don't think it phases him. He probably would rather it didn't happen, but he's not going to let it phase him.
Come and see the Reds with me, and you will swear that you have seen a vision. We know just how they feel when they beat me by the field. We're off to the second division.
Wrexham went north to the Brick Community Stadium to take on Wigan Athletic in EFL League One action. Phil Parkinson named an unchanged side from the 3-0 win over Burton Albion. Okonkwo in goal, Cleworth, O'Connell and Brunt at the back, Longman and McLean on the wings, James, Dobson and Rathbone in the middle, Smith and Rodriguez up front. The weather mirrored the game, starting in bright, warm, optimistic sunlight, and that morphed into dull and overcast both in the clouds and on the pitch. Like two punch-drunk boxers swinging and missing at each other, both Wrexham and Wigan were disappointing to say the least, with the home side having the best two chances, Conco having to make a couple of decent saves, one in particular which kept the ball out of the back of the net. But Wrexham finishing with no shots on target just about summed up a very forgettable game. Wrexham remained second in the League One, and now only 1 point ahead of Wycombe in third. Jamie, good luck finding the positives from this one. What did you make of this game?
Well, the good news is we won't need the 10-minute timer this week. What did I make of this one? Wow. Before the game, I was so disappointed that I couldn't go because all I could see was all the pictures and all the fan chatter on social media, and it looked incredible. And I could just feel it was going to be an incredible away end. And I was unfortunately working, so I never tried to get tickets because I couldn't go. But I was really disappointed that I couldn't. But turn the clock forward a couple of hours later, and I was laughing my nuts off at you. I'll be honest. No, look, you can't beat around the bush. There is very little to really say about the game. The lineup you mentioned there again unchanged. And it's become a theme, hasn't it, in recent weeks? Unchanged. And I think I can understand it. I can understand. I can understand not changing a winning team or a team that's been getting good results. But I think that game on Saturday did highlight or did ask the question for me about the freshness of some of the players. You've got some players in our team, in our squad, who are there because they are experienced pros at the back end of their career, but that has a price. That comes at a price, and the price is that they probably can't do week in, week out 90 minutes. Is it starting to show? Look, it's easy to say that now, isn't it? Because we played so poorly. But you have to ask that question: is picking this same team week in, week out for the last however many games, is that starting to take its toll? I don't know, but it is what it is. But I think before I do say anything about the game, and there isn't a great deal to say about the game, I think it's personally I've seen, as is the case whenever we have a poor performance, or in the grand scale of things, you can't call this a bad result. It was a poor performance, but you can't really call it a bad result. It's a game.
Hang on a second, right? This is before I'll let you get back in a second. This is the problem I have. Okay, there have been lots of critical voices on social media, right? And I get that. And then lots of people saying, "No, you shouldn't use your head," and blah 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 blah. I criticise not because of the result. That's not what I'm criticising. It's the performance I have a problem with. Sorry, do carry on.
Yeah, no, and that is a way of saying exactly what I was about to say, which is. Before commenting anything specifically about the game, I think it is important that at this stage, given where we're at, not to completely lose our heads and go in two-footed. I've read some unbelievable crap this week, as is always the case, and I'm not surprised by it anymore because it's always the case. Everybody's better than Parky and everybody could do a better job and all that jazz. I think at this stage, given where we're at, it's still in our hands. It's still in our control. I don't see the point in losing our shit at this moment in time. If we, God forbid, but if we turn the clock forward, 4 games, or if we end up having to go through playoffs, and if for whatever reason we end up staying in this division, then I think bigger questions should and can be asked and discussed. But at this stage of the season, it seems to me counterproductive to go two-footed in on Parky, Jay Rodriguez, whatever it might be, all the stuff I've read this week. However, you are absolutely spot on. And I think as a supporter, as a fan, as a follower, as us in this instance where we've got this platform that we talk about it, it is absolutely fair to discuss and to comment on what was a terribly poor performance. At a stage of the season where you're 5 games from the finish line, you have had the results go massively in your favour the weekend before, and you've got yourself in a prime position. You are going for a historic promotion if you would have said those things to somebody and then showed them that game, they would have laughed at you, because that's not what it looked like at all. And I think you then throw into the mix, and this is not the first time it's happened this season, you then throw into the mix 4,500 fans who have paid their hard-earned money, given up their time and all the expense and everything else to go and follow the team and support the team, to then put in a performance of that kind of level is really disappointing. And you're absolutely spot on, very, very much within your rights to comment on a poor performance. And like I say, the biggest thing that I took away from it was it certainly wasn't a performance befitting a team that, was 4 or 5 games away from a historic promotion. But if anything, it highlighted for me, it was a game which just emphasize what I've been saying for months, which is we have not been playing well. We haven't played well for a long, long time. And I accept that, because, yes, I'd love to see, and I've said this before, I would love to see attractive, attacking, fast-paced football. That's the type of football I like to watch. But would I rather that over winning and being successful? No, of course I wouldn't. I want my team to be as successful and win as many games as possible. And Parky's method of achieving that cannot be questioned. Given where we're at, it can't be questioned. Do I like the style of football we play? No. But I think if you asked every one of our fans and you asked them that question, do you like the style of football we play? I think most of them, unless they're clinically insane, would say, no, I don't. But it's effective, and you can't knock that. But when the result doesn't go your way, i.e. you don't have that bit of luck, which we get quite frequently, or you don't have that one bit, what that one moment in a game where you're able to grab a goal and therefore win the game because you've been able to keep the ball out at the other end, and you end up with a drab 0-0, or you end up with a loss 1-0 because the other team has caught you out, or whatever it might be. It does highlight the fact that we are not playing particularly well, and haven't done for a lot of this season. Go back to, we won 3-0 on paper to Burton, against Burton last weekend. If you look at that on paper, you think, oh, that's a convincing, dominating win, but it wasn't. We talked about it last week, so it just highlights that for me. But I mean, the stats you've obviously, for the viewer, you've put the stats up there. I mean, they make for grim reading. We've had 58% of the possession. We've had 4 shots in the whole game and not a single shot on target. Again, for a team that is, second, fighting for an automatic promotion, that's just not good. It's not good enough, is it? It isn't good enough. You're never going to win games if you don't shoot on target. So that's that is a pretty damning set of stats, in all honesty. And I couldn't quite believe it when I saw them. I've watched the highlights a couple of times, and the highlights are laughable because
Are there any? Are there any highlights?
Well, the best highlight was the Wigan mascot doing a little dance before the game, if I'm honest, in his pie costume. But other than that, there wasn't a lot going on.
I'll tell you what the highlights were. You probably didn't see them on telly. 2 guys in Zorbs knocking 7 bells and whatnot out of each other at half time. That was the highlight of the entire game.
I mean, the 4 chances we did have were very, very half chances at best. I think probably the best of them was Dobson's effort in the first half, which was a shot which ended up it was nowhere near the goal, let's put it that way. So it never threatened the goal. And I think if you're being fair, Wigan weren't much better. But then you look at their league position, and that performance was probably reflective on where their league position is.
They were delighted at the end with that point.
I bet they were.
They were absolutely.
I bet they were.
Hoop at the end.
Yeah, I bet they were. And I think if you're being brutally honest, I think they probably had the best chance of the game. That counter attack where what was his name? A Samoa Junior, I think his name was, aka Roadrunner. I mean,
from a Wrexham corner. Let's not forget that.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Corner that we completely messed up.
Absolutely, but that counter attack, that lad's pace was unbelievable. When he knocked that ball past Dobson, he ran past him like as if he was standing still. And in fairness, what I saw from that was a young, inexperienced player who's obviously just coming up the ranks because his final product was poor and it was an easy save for Arthur. But to say that was the best effort from both teams in 94 minutes of football was crazy.
With a man open in the middle as well, such the wrong choice for them. So luckily for Wrexham, because that was a sitter for the other guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But genuinely, unless I'm missing something, and you were there, I really can't say much more about that game. As I said before, I really felt for you guys as fans that went there, because it looked incredible to see that stand fully packed out, and I'm sure certainly for big portions of the game, the atmosphere would have been great, because we've been in Wrexham away ends when it's full, and it is a great place to be. It's just a shame that they weren't given something off the pitch, and then obviously I was heading back from where I was working, and I pulled over before I did this. I wasn't driving when I did this, of course, but I was checking the literally it was the last couple of minutes of this game and the Wickham game at the same time, and I was constantly refreshing the screen, and I was thinking, do you know what? It sounds like we've played awful, because at this point I hadn't seen the game. It sounds like we've played awful, but we're going to get away with it again here, because Wickham was still 0-0, and then lo and behold, 90 minutes plus one, Wickham got a goal. So it was a bit of a sucker punch from that perspective. However, we were talking about it last week. We talked about it the week before, and I'm sure we're talking about it again tonight. We said there would be twists and turns. These are your twists and turns. Last weekend was our weekend. Wickham lost to Reading. We ended up beating Burton 3-0. It was our weekend. The weekend just gone. Wickham have made ground upon us now. But the bottom line is, and I think I said this last week, if you can't win, don't lose. And that's what we've done. We've not lost the game. It is still in our hands, but what it now does is it puts much more pressure on these two games coming up over Easter weekend than maybe, there was already pressure, because it's a pressure cooker time, isn't it? But it's now added that little bit more emphasis on these two games coming up. But yeah, definitely one to forget. And I think, like I say, if at the end of the season, for whatever reason, we end up staying in League One, these will be the kinds of games I think we'll come back to, and we'll probably talk about in much more detail. But for the sake of this, let's just say it was shit, but not all was lost. On we go to Friday.
Daz, as we said, lots of criticism about the performance, but it is a point on the road against the side that is shown to be difficult team to beat. Can we take that as a positive at this point of the season?
Positives, yeah. I mean, I think Jamie said it there, though. If you're a contender and you're pushing for this this position that you've got yourselves into, then taking satisfaction out of such a poor performance and a 0-0 is not really where you want to be. But I accept that they don't concede many goals. That nobody, their goals, their games have been like 1-0, 0-0, 1-1, really low scoring affairs. And so of course they did see it as a sort of a victory for them. But for Wrexham, you've got to think. Ambition, their ambition is in a completely different place, and I think not losing. Okay, fair enough. That's the key thing here. And having watched, I mean, I did watch the highlights in the the Sunday night show on ITV, which is like 2 attempts at goal were the highlights. I mean, it was literally one of the shortest clips I've seen of Wrexham covered on that show. And one of them was that Leopard down the right wing, just so fast. He's so fast.
Just for shits and giggles, right? After this, I beg you both to go onto the official club website and watch the extended highlights, because they managed to find 9 minutes and 52 seconds of extended highlights, and it's painful watching, I tell you.
Wow.
Nah, I'm washing my hair. Thanks, mate. No, I mean, it's because what are we looking at? Wigan are in 17th, and another draw for them after a series of draws and defeats. It's of course they're going to be happy with that. But equally, Wrexham didn't lose, and I think that is the positive. You're absolutely right. You can take a positive out of it. You didn't lose, but when you've been giving yourself a platform where it was in your own hands, and okay, still, but your cushion's gone, and we did say last week before, there will be points dropped. Didn't expect it to be so quickly, and didn't expect it to be in quite such fashion with because I was busy on Saturday, and I was watching both the scores, and it was 0-0, 0-0. Both of them were 0-0, 0-0. I was thinking, this is interesting. This is interesting. And then just to see, that late, goal scored by Wickham, then it's yeah, of course, it makes it really exciting for the neutrals, but nobody wants it for the neutrals. Wrexham won it outright, so yeah, disappointment, but at least it wasn't defeat, and that's important.
Jamie, I'm going to say this very carefully. Jay Rodriguez, many fans are saying they are surprised he's still selected, considering what some might seem to be poor performances from him. He's often fairly invisible. Scored 2 goals, both from penalties since he's arrived. But we've only lost twice in 14 games he's started. And many have said that if any other player had contributed the level that Rodriguez has over 14 games, they'd have been dropped. Are you a yay rod or a nay rod?
Nayrod. Look, I think just to sort of echo what I said a minute ago in the Wigan game, I don't think now is the time to go in 2-footed on anything or anybody. I've seen obviously a lot of the fallout from the performance last week was around obviously the team performance generally, but there was an awful lot of focus on Jay Rodriguez. And I guess Parky as a result of that for continuing to pick him. I also saw I also saw a lot of people calling out what you've just said about the stats since him and Smith came into the team, and that generally our performance in that time has been a very good return. If I'm being brutally honest, whilst I am happy to sort of listen to that as an argument, and I suppose you can't argue with the facts, I don't really see a correlation, because for me, and this is only my humble opinion, and without being too sort of nasty about it, I am really struggling to understand the Jay Rodriguez thing. I'll be honest with you. Without the context of being able to get an understanding of what Phil Parkinson sees he's giving to the team, and ultimately I have not got access to that. I can only base an opinion on what I'm seeing. Now, I can see the games the same as he's seeing them every week. Obviously, I don't see him in training and everything else, but you'd think to yourself, if he is being a worldie in training, but not producing it on a Saturday afternoon or Thursday afternoon or whenever it bloody is, then that's more important. You're doing it in training is one thing, but you've got to be able to do it on the pitch. And I am genuinely, I am at a loss as to what he is giving the team. I can't see it, and I'm not claiming to be a football expert by any stretch, but I've watched a lot of football over the years at different levels, and I'd like to think I've got a reasonably good understanding of the game. And I am really struggling to see what it is he is giving this team, if I'm being brutally honest. So I do understand the kind of I do understand some of the criticism that's being levelled at him and at Parky, and I do understand the sort of head scratching about why he continues to be picked as a starter over and above some of the other options we have available. Whether Paul Mullin is the answer, whether Ollie Palmer is the answer, which is obviously the two that are getting clamoured for, whether they are the answer, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. I'm not necessarily sure that in the way we're set up to play, putting Mullin in for Rodriguez, I'm not sure that's the answer. I'm not sure that would work. But I do understand the kind of head scratching over Jay Rodriguez, because I really struggled to see what he's brought to this Wrexham team how many games has he played now? He came in January. He's played 14 games. Yeah, that's a lot of games in a season. That's a lot of games he's played now. Yes, he scored 2 goals, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, you watch all the games the same as I do. What's your opinion?
I mean, again, like you, I don't see it. But Parky must see something to continually pick him.
Yeah, let me ask you this question, right? As a slight alternative question, then, right? We brought in 2 strikers in January because I think it was universally kind of agreed amongst fans and obviously amongst the hierarchy at Wrexham that we were lacking in the striking department. Hence why we went and brought in two strikers. Now, Ollie Palmer, if we could get Paul Mullin for a minute, but Ollie Palmer was an ever-present for a big part, certainly the first half of this season. And whilst I don't change my opinion I had at the time, which was, I think he was effective as a sort of workhorse, but ultimately as a striker, he didn't produce goals, and ultimately that's what a striker should be judged on. However, would you think? Do you think that Rodriguez has given us anything more than Ollie Palmer was giving us in the first half of the season, or has he given us less than Ollie Palmer was giving us? And that's the question.
He's certainly given us anything more. I mean, here's
No.
a stat for you, right? Take the Burton game out of the equation because they had 10 men for 80 minutes, right? But for the last 12 games, barring that one, no team in the entire league has had less shots than we have in 13 games.
We've been talking about it on here, and it's the talk amongst all the fan base, isn't it? You know, the lack of chances we create. It comes back down to the way we play. We are set up, and ultimately, like I say, none of us on here, none of us, and no fan anywhere can criticise Phil Parkinson. But ultimately, the way he chose to set us up, which is the way he believes is the best way to get us out of this division, is the way we're being set up to play and the way we play, which is fundamentally a very defensive, out of possession way of playing the game, and that's fine. And I think maybe it's just, it's difficult for us to understand, or it's difficult for us to come to terms with, given what we've maybe been used to last year, and certainly in the National League days, where we were like just gun ho, weren't we? You know, it was if the opposition scores 3 or we'll score 4. This is a complete role reversal, but you still have to create chances. You still have to score goals. And like we said last week, the fact that we've got Stephen Fletcher, given the striking options we've got on our books, the fact that Stephen Fletcher is our top scorer, as in forget Sam Smith's goals that he got before he came to us from Reading, because those don't count in a Wrexham shirt. But from a Wrexham point of view only, the fact that our top scorer from the striking department is Stephen Fletcher is absolutely nuts. Is nuts. But that's not me lobbing things at the strikers. Throwing things like heavily towards the strikers as that it's all their fault. Because as a team, we do not create a lot of chances. We don't create a lot of chances for our forwards. So we're relying on them creating their own chances. Now, in years gone by, Paul Mullin was able to do that in the National League, League Two. He struggled in the few games he's played in League One this year. He struggled to do that. Sam Smith's a good example. He's shown us already he's able to sort of create his own chances. But then you come back full circle to what you asked me at the start of this, was about Jay Rodriguez. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's offering this team, because he to me he's not other than an extra good header of a ball from a defensive perspective, and I'm proper clutching at straws there. That's about all I can say he's really given us.
Daz, I mean, you're the neutral. You've seen us play this season. We've gone from, we started off really, really well. I mean, look at that first game of the season, against Wycombe, where we scored 5 goals. And we got to a point where we were scoring large amounts, and then suddenly, as if a switch was flipped, and the reason why you're the top of the league: 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. Have you seen a change in the side with regards to their playing style this season?
Yeah, but I think it's also indicative of the fact that you've got these back-to-back promotions. You've still got players that kind of joined to get you out of that first division, and then joined last division, the last league last year. And unless you're going wholesale every year with new qualities up in the game of every player, you're only sort of edging a little bit by little bit. And I do think that some of it's to do with the fact that you just don't have enough of the players that you aspirationally want to be at the top half of that division. And certainly for next year, I think there's a gulf between your strongest players and your also on the benches, your depth in the squad, in terms of once if we're accepting that some of the opponents have sort of learned how to play against Wrexham, they recognise how to nullify some of those particular tactics, and maybe this is a criticism of the management as well, is that they don't have the plan B, C, and D that we crave for, and you guys have said that before. But even then, if you have quality players, you can unlock teams, you can still make the difference and stuff. And I just wonder if you've got enough of those Fletchers, or Elliot Lee's on his day, but even then, I feel like even he's been found out a little bit more in this season, and he's a quality, midfielder and unlocks with the passing and the stuff like that. But the fitness levels of the opponents now this season, maybe that's part of it as well. As you get into the second half of the season, you've got a squad there who may not necessarily be used to this level consistently, but also some of the signings you've made, they are either, I'm not going to say they're risky, but there's an element of seasoned veterans. There is a little bit of youth. I haven't seen enough of that youth getting first team play, though, must be said. So I don't know what that investment is for. Is it backup, or is it about embedding them into a squad, learning off the veterans so that they genuinely improve their game and they are somebody for the future? But we haven't seen enough of them on the pitch to know whether or not they were astute acquisitions in the first place. So I think it's a combination of things, really. But I do think people are getting, they're savvy to Wrexham, and I do think that the range, the mixing it up is lacking, and that makes it just easier for the opponents, I think.
Now it's time for the away day fish and chip review.
Well, here we are at Wigan for the away day fish and chip review. Of course, to be in Wigan, we've got to do a pie review. And look at this beauty. Yes, this is from Galloway's, as recommended by Barry from the Wigan podcast. And this is a deep-filled steak pie for £3.45. I'm not going to give you an MSR, because I'm sure Jamie wouldn't want to see a fat Welshman stuff his face with the pie. So, straight back after this. Well, one empty pie dish later, and the good news is I didn't manage to get any of it on me, which is a good start. A fantastic pie, incredible pastry, nice and fluffy, but not flaky, like super flaky, the way it makes a lot of mess, but really, really tasty. In the insides, the filling, massive piece of steak, great gravy, nice and thick gravy, lovely, lovely taste. 4 out of 5 fries for the filling, 4 out of 5 fries for the pastry, 8 out of 10 for the pie from Galloway's. Congratulations to them, well done. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I'm now going to go and find my way into the ground and come on to town. Oh man, Daz, seriously, you'd have loved that pie.
Very good, very good. That's much better. The quality of that was much better. The only thing that I'm going to say on that, I wish to God you would have sent me that footage before this pod recording, because I would have edited that footage and changed the name of the stand behind you.
I was just more impressed by the fact that the insides, or you went a bit posh then and called it the filling.
The filling.
But the insides did sound very lovely. So
mate, I know you like a pie. You like a good pie.
Absolutely.
And I got the deep filled one. It was. I mean, how I wasn't wearing it by the end was a miracle. Because the guy offered me a fork. He said, "Does no one a fork?" And I was like, "Fork? No."
Okay.
I said, "No, moist." And I should have taken a fork, because it was. Yeah, I was
Wow.
really anyway. But yeah,
Just for the audio listener, because I'm conscious that they won't know what I was talking about a minute ago. Just for the audio, visual description, your video then of your pie review, you were stood in front of a stand that was called the Brick Stand, and I would have liked to have changed it for the Prick Stand. So just so that there's no confusion.
I don't think they need any explanation of that, do they? Let's be honest.
Well,
The last game of this season's Gennaro Adran Premier League for Wrexham Women was versus TNS Women. Steve Dale made 4 changes for this game. In her last professional league game before retirement, Del Morgan was named captain and replaced Lizzie Craven in goal. Phoebe Davis, Erin Lovett for Karen Allen, Brooke Cairns for Cara Jones, Nat Clark, Mary Gibbard, Lily Jones, Rebecca Pritchard, Amber Lightfoot for Ava Suckley, Rosie Hughes and Abby Innenden. A close tussle with 2 teams slugging it out, often end to end. Wrexham sometimes had the upper hand, but TNS were always a threat on the break. TNS eventually managed to get that breakthrough on 83 minutes, and it was too late then managing to hang on, Wrexham losing the game 1-0. Wrexham so finished the season 4th in the league, 1 position lower than last season's finish. Daz, a tight and very competitive match. What did you make of this game?
Yeah. I mean, you knew it was a tight game when the highlights when Scorio only gave a okay. I'll put into context. They the majority of their coverage went to the Cardiff Llansamble game, which is understandable because champions elect as they were, and it was an end-to-end game where that went to 3-2 in literally the last minute, and it was a stonking game, and I can understand why they had the highlights, and then they then proceeded to give the highlights from the Wrexham game, which was just the goal. Now, I know that that's not entirely the truth. I mean, there was a lot, by the sounds of things, a lot of opportunities squandered, a few headers across over the top of the bar, a few shots going wide from both teams. So it sounded like an evenly matched game, and the scoreline obviously suggests that too. But you're reading through all the sort of the match reports and stuff, and how firstly, notable mention then, obviously, Del Morgan, captain. You've just said it there before she retires, and obviously her services to Wrexham well noted already. And to be honest, from what I can gather, she was busy from the very beginning. Kept
He was
Wrexham.
player of the game, Daz, without a shadow of a doubt. Player of the
It,
game.
it sounded like that she was under the cosh quite a lot. She kept Wrexham properly in the game. So fair play to her, because considering she's not been first picked, and I appreciate that's other commitments have made that harder for her. But she'll be a loss to the team clearly, because she's still a good fine keeper. But the early chances, there were a few for TNS. Then obviously Wrexham found their feet a little bit after that. And then there were some chances on both sides, as I say, both going wide, some shots that were really straight down the throat of the goalkeeper. So, there were opportunities. But it was, a relatively, even matched first half. But if you read the TNS match report, they say they edged it. If you read another one, they say Wrexham were probably in it as well. But it felt like if I was going to do points like a boxing card, TNS probably just edged the first half, but still 0-0. Then the second half sounds like a real ding dong of a tussle, really, because as much as there were, obviously there was conceding a late goal, 81, the 81st minute or something like that. So still 9-10 minutes to go. But having had Wrexham hit the post and hit the crossbar in the lead up to those moments, and it's when you brew those chances. Again, I can't decide from what I've sort of been reading that whether or not Wrexham deserved it, but they had the chances. And if you don't take those chances, both Rosie and Innenden, I think it was, who hit post. So two quality finishers not quite hitting the mark and stuff, and then TNS took their moment, took their chance, and it sounds like it was a really not against the run of play, but there was a period of play where Wrexham were probably beginning to get into it, having had those chances against the woodwork, were probably the dominant side in that 10-minute period, and midfield just lost the ball. I watched the clip, and it's a turnover and the through ball down the wing, a fantastically simple cross really to an unmarked striker in the middle who just knocks it in, and it's a neat finish. And you just think, just switched off for one moment. Felt the team just switched off for one moment, and that's harsh, because that could have been the difference between Okay, not losing the game. I know they needed to win anyway to leapfrog TNS, but still, it would have given them some confidence going into the cup final. It's a shame that it's such a, like I say, a sucker punch at such a late stage of the game. They still had their chances. Both teams still had chances to score more goals after that in the final 10 minutes. It's still, it just feels like all the reports just suggest that it was it was the if buts and maybes of lots of shots that on a different day they're hitting the target. But keepers did well as well. They did their part, and apart from that, say one moment in a game, which is a shame, really. So you've got to think, right. Well, what does that mean about Wrexham's preparations going into to their next match, to the cup final? Because there was a significant number of changes. So we were talking about this last week, weren't we? About, do you rest players? This is a dead rubber, other than pride of third and fourth. Which one? The record books will now show Wrexham were in fourth. Would it have mattered? Who knows? But it's interesting that there were some, plenty of first team starters not starting. Obviously, Lizzie Craven obviously was dropped to the bench, but that was a ceremonial sort of opportunity to give Del Morgan her sort of, not a testimonial, but you know what I mean, an opportunity to be thanked and stuff. That might be quite good, might be useful for Craven, just to have a week off and all of that. But other players that you think, right, okay, would you have rested Idenden, Cara Jones, Lily Jones? Some of these players who have just been, relentless in their play. They did they get the rest they needed? And so it's interesting that that Steve Dale has gone for resting some players, but I'm not entirely sure he could rest all the ones he wanted to. I think you lose the backbone and the shape of the team if you lose some of those key players. And but what can you say? I've seen players be rested and then they're rubbish in the next game because they lose their match fitness and their sharpness. So you can never be sure how these things will turn out, and I suppose we won't know until the cup final. Cardiff, on the other hand, I did have a look at them. They seem to put out a strong side. I mean, they have got a little bit more strength in depth, so they could rest a couple of players. But actually, they still had their top scorer, or one of their top scorers, Barry, keeps coming on as a sub. I mean, she's not even their first choice, and yet she's in 9-10 goals in the last sort of 8 games or something silly like that. They are still a threat, even though Llansamble managed to peg them back a couple of. It was, for those who don't know, it was like 1-0 to Cardiff, then it was 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, and then the last minute, it was a messy goal, but it counted, gave Cardiff the win on at the Cardiff City Stadium, which gave them the opportunity to celebrate a win, whilst also being awarded the trophy and stuff. So it was quite the day for them. Llansamble played their part and really pushed them. So I think, looking at Llansamble and looking at what Wrexham can do, I think they have got the opportunity to match them. I think they can go toe to toe, but they've got to make sure they don't switch off. They've got to make sure they keep their attention all the way through, because, like I say, even if it's the one clip I've actually seen, it's the bit that just shows you switch off for 1 second, and a quality team will finish that move off, and Cardiff are going to be that team. So I think it. I don't think Wrexham should be despondent about it. It's like I say, it's a dead rubber, and I think it probably was hard to get that motivational, that energy up, knowing you've probably got most of your team looking ahead at a cup final, and as a bit of a distraction. So here's hoping that this is not an indicator of anything. But I do think we've seen Wrexham play better. And that's what they're going to need to do next week.
Jamie, interesting, Ava Suckley being left on the bench and Rosie starting alongside Abby. Should you make anything of that?
I don't think so. I think we've spoken about Ava Suckley in recent weeks, about how good of a in this second half of the season resurgence that the team has had. She she has been, arguably the pick of the bunch, or very much up there with, with Abby Innidan. I, y- my personal take on it, without any knowing any context to whether she was carrying a knock or something, it could have been something completely as innocent as just she might have just had a knock or something. But assuming that wasn't the case, my interpretation is that uh, she is seen as a pivotal part of our first team 11. And as a result of that, I think possibly, she was maybe put in cotton wool a little bit by being kept out of the starting lineup. I also think as well it might have been a little bit of reward for, for Rosie Hughes' recent performances. She has had some good games in recent weeks, and obviously let's not forget, what she's contributed in the past. So, there may have been that element to it as well. No, I don't think there's anything to particularly read into it. I mean, we're just very lucky, aren't we, to have, you're talking about two players there that are at this level are big quality players.
Daz, Wrexham then finished 4th in the league, and obviously in the final, as you said, of the Beauty Energy Women's FA Cup for a second year running. Do you think Wrexham management will see the 4th place finish as a disappointment or a good result?
If you were to say they'd come 4th at the beginning of the season, they probably would have seen that as a disappointment. If you'd asked this same question about 3 weeks before the split, then they're probably thinking, well, we gave TNS a good run for the money, because don't forget, TNS had a stellar start to the season, and so chase them down. Only just let Britain Ferry just get away from them a little bit at the end there. So because 4 points in it, that's that's not much, is it? In terms of a season of that sort, they were all close, but the key thing is that there's a whole 10 points gap though between first and second, and that's the thing where at the beginning of the season where we thought maybe TNS, maybe Wrexham, maybe Swansea, any of these teams originally, can they close Cardiff down? I thought this was it. I thought this was going to be a very different season. It felt far more open. I think you pointed out about the million signings that TNS had made in their pre-season. Would that be to their benefit? Clearly, it has. So I think ultimately, Wrexham, because of their first half of the season, don't deserve necessarily to be much higher than 4th. I think that's credit for a season long. That is 4th, I think. But the fact they made 4th at a time when it was looking very doubtful, I think they have to take the positives out of that. Almost like the comeback that they made mid-season to get to that point. But I think what it does do is just gives us a sort of real indicator about maybe what next season is going to look like. But I also think it's going to give the management and the owners a bit more food for thought, because you've got Britain Ferry there on 36, whatever. New Saints and Wrexham obviously in the 30s. Swansea has got 37, but that's because of the split, so let's not get skewed by that. But you're talking there about 5 teams from Cardiff down to Swansea, you are all capable of beating each other on any given day. Barry have put in some shock results in the mix as well. Aberystwyth not in the same league, and Cardiff Met no longer in the same league. It's I think you've got 5 teams there who all can do really well. It's just, what are the clubs going to do next? Are they going to invest? Are they going to look for that talent? But my concern year on year will be, where is that talent coming from? I don't know where they're finding it. It's certainly their academies are doing that. They're all so a lot of these teams are young. Just talking to friends back home in Aberystwyth, the Aberystwyth team is just virtually a couple of senior players and an academy all playing for first team. So they're already using that depth. Can they entice more fringe players from the English setup to come and play for the Welsh teams and just raise the bar a bit more. If the standard is better, then you get more crowds. The crowds get you more revenue. The revenue, it's a cycle. We've got to up the game at the moment. You only have to look at the women's international game where the numbers, are slowly improving, but they're nowhere near the men's situation. So it's I don't know. It's a whole problem around women's game, full stop, which we've got to try and unlock that cycle of otherwise we're just perpetually just going to be the same players. Any good players will keep doing the same thing, which is they'll go to an English club or Europe. It's not just WSL, but anybody of any note, of any quality, is getting snapped up by the other leagues. We've got to see how do we get better players, and if that means getting a few more on the retiring on the way down, just to raise the standard of the game. But I don't think the money's there. I don't think the pay is there. So there's something's not quite right there. And once you've only got a league of 8 teams, and they haven't got the footfall, then I don't know where the sponsors are coming from. I don't know where the backing's coming from. FAW, can they bankroll it a bit more for a bit longer? At some point, somebody's going to have to make some sort of tough decisions. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. But I do think it'll be really interesting to see who makes who is bought, who moves, and who's making the most movement in terms of buying new players for next year.
Now on the Eat More Chips podcast, it's time for today's newspaper, tomorrow's chip paper, where we catch up on Cymru and Wrexham football news. First up, Wrexham Academy under-18s took on Walsall under-18s at Colliers Park and won the game 2-0. Both goals from the current goal machine, Rio Owen, making it 26 goals in total for Academy and reserves this season. Wrexham moved to the top of the EFL Youth Alliance League, 1 point ahead of Bolton in second, who have 3 games in hand. Wrexham next meet third place Rotherham United under-18s on Friday the 18th. Wrexham under-19s women needed a win last Friday and came away with a comfortable 5-0 win over the Conisky Nomads. 2 goals from Sienna Perry, 2 goals from Grace Morris and a goal from Bella Riley. This win clinched the Adran under-19s North League for the 3rd time in 4 years. Jamie, Academy first. That's 11 games unbeaten, 9 wins, 2 draws. Pretty much secures second spot for the 2nd year running. We're running out of superlatives for this side, aren't we, really?
Yes, I am. What I heard you say there was drop Jay Rodriguez and put Rio Owen in. That's what I heard.
Well, I mean, 26 goals.
I mean, the lad is just a goal machine, an absolute goal machine. I mean, in all seriousness, we can't comment greatly on this youth system because we don't get to see the games and we don't get to see these lads in action. But as the season's gone on and as these results have transpired, you get a pattern and you get a feel. And certainly somebody that's knocking goals in, week out, can only be a good thing for us. We might have a real player on our hands there, and somebody that in the not too distant future might be knocking on the door of the first team. But yeah, I absolutely hats off to him for certainly these last few games in particular. He's just been, like you say, absolute goal machine. But yeah, the team as a whole, another good result, another good win, like you say, securing second. What can you say? They are, without being able to give a lot of context to how they play, they're clearly a good quality bunch of lads. They're obviously being looked after well and they're being coached well. Granted, we don't know the quality of the opposition that they're facing, but at the end of the day, these lads that they're going to be coming up against are, they're going to be of a similar kind of stature in their own respective clubs. Although just looking at that Walsall team sheet, that unknown, he's got a lot of roles in, hasn't he? Come on, here all week. But no, fair play. You can't, there's not a great deal more we can say than we keep lauding praise on them week in, week out. They've had another cracking season.
Daz, massive congrats to the under-19s women on winning the league. How important is this group of players to the senior squad and potential players moving forward?
Yeah, well, exactly. It's kind of picking up on what I was saying before. It is so important that the club invest and support and promote the game at this level. I think that's been a shift in the last couple of years, which has been very much welcomed. Which is, hopefully not going to change. I think, but I think what's important for these players is that they can see themselves playing in the first team quite soon as well. So there's that potential to step up. So I think lots of positive signs. I think any youth system, it's really about reaching at the grassroots, recruiting properly, giving opportunities, and hopefully that with a better training facilities and working alongside semi-pro athletes, that's just the motivation and inspiration that they need to improve their game. So hopefully bodes well for the senior team moving forward.
Phil Parkinson has won the EFL League One Manager of the Month for March, leading the team to 16 points from 7 games, 6 clean sheets in total. This is the second award this season and his 5th since taking over at Wrexham. On winning the award, Phil said, "I'm delighted to get the award. It was a good effort through the month of March by all the staff and players, and it has set us up nicely for the run-in." Phil Parkinson has also been shortlisted for the EFL League One Manager of the Season award, sponsored by Football Manager. Phil is nominated alongside Chris Davis of Birmingham City, Nathan Jones of Charlton Athletic, and Richie Wellens of Leyton Orient for the award, with the winner to be announced at the annual EFL Awards dinner in London on Sunday, April 27th. Jamie, congrats to Phil first. Are you suspicious or superstitious, should I say? As usually you win this and then the results nosedive. Are you superstitious?
No, but I bet he was cursing the thing and volleyed it into the bin after that game in Wigan. No, it's crap, isn't it? Ultimately, I think we asked the question last week, didn't we? Will it? I think you did say last week when we talked about the nomination before we knew he'd won it. Will he be bothered if he wins or loses? And like we said, it's nice. It's nice to get some recognition, isn't it, for what you're doing? For what you're doing in your job. But he won't give a monkeys about individual awards like that. As for the being nominated for the manager of the season, quite rightly, I think absolutely he's quite right to be nominated. I think whether he wins or not depends on what happens with us. I think if we get promoted, he has to be a shoe-in for it for me, regardless of what the Birmingham fellow, what's his name, Chris Davis, regardless of the fact that they have gone promoted in a record time and are going to probably get a record points haul, and they've won the championship, and then they lost in the Virtue Trophy final. But still, I think for me, if Parky gets it done and we get promoted, just on the basis of a back to back, and to have done it again in a first season back, he has to win it, surely to God. But who knows? I don't know the I don't know the parameters behind what these guys look at when they pick these things. With the greatest respect, the other two that you mentioned, Nathan Jones and Richie Wellens, wasn't it? I think, without being rude, and I genuinely am not trying to be disrespectful, but
you're going
what
to
are you laughing for?
You're going to be, yeah, exactly.
No. I'm genuinely not being disrespectful, but it seems a bit daft to me that you're going to give this award before the season's even finished. To me, that's crazy, because I think if you look at it, and if we don't get promoted and say Charlton do, then you'd have to say that Nathan Jones has probably got a good shout for it. But to be giving it out before the season's even ended, unless the promotions are all sorted, but even then the playoffs won't be. It seems a bit of a crazy time. So if you're basing it on everything up till that point, like I say, I don't know what the criteria is. But I suppose if you're looking at just on what you've achieved at that point, then you'd have to give it to Chris Davis, because Birmingham have sewn up promotion and sewn up the championship with 6 games to go. But yeah, like I say, for me, if we get promoted, I think you just got to be Parky, surely.
Daz, you can't say Wrexham have played incredibly this season, as we said earlier, that we've stuttered and are stumbling over the line, if anything. Parky still has his criticisers, particularly on his tactics and some of his play. If big if Wrexham get that third successive promotion, does he deserve League One Manager of the season?
Well, I was going to just ask Jamie then. Is winning the league or promotion the only way you met? What like I say, what is the criteria? Can you win this title of manager this season without promotion? Because I suppose it's to do with where you started from and what that journey is, the resources you've got given to you. I mean, I bet if you look into the financial books of all these clubs, there'll be a whole load of other clubs going, well, on pound per player spent, income versus outgoings, this manager did a better job because he managed to get 47 points off the basis of 2 shillings and sixpence, whereas Birmingham have got record haul, but then they've probably got the record wages for so it's really arbitrary,
It's
sort of numbers, isn't it? That's the thing.
you're right. It's fascinating. It would be fascinating to know what they've based the four candidates on, because if you look at it, you'd have to say if Phil Parkinson's been nominated and Nathan Jones been nominated, you'd have to look at it and say, well, as much as I can't stand the git, you'd have to say, does Dave Challoner deserve a shout? You'd have to say, what's the Reading manager's name? Does he deserve? Do they deserve it potentially? The Wickham, obviously, if the guy that started them as their manager at the beginning of the season, if he hadn't have left, I'm sure he would have been one of the four. But you're right. What's the criteria to? Because I suppose if you look at Reading's position, if they end up securing a playoff place, you've got to look at that and say, Jesus Christ, that's a hell of an achievement given the turmoil that's going on there off the field.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I said, I don't know.
I think going back to the fact that Wrexham coming from a different division and getting that this far, even if they do or don't, this has been one hell of a season. Now, how they've done it, we've talked about it week on week, but they've done it somehow, whatever that is. So whether it is buying good players, good tactics, whatever, but there's
Lots of
something.
brown envelopes with Disney dollars in.
Yeah.
Well, but how much, is Parkinson sort of putting the right amount of brown envelopes in front of the right people? Good management.
Well, you say that, there was an interesting stat today that on agents' fees that I saw,
Oh God, yeah.
Wrexham was second only to Birmingham with agents' fees.
I read that
No,
this
they
morning
weren't.
in the
They
news.
weren't. Were they? They were third. Doesn't Huddersfield spend more?
Oh yes, sorry, Huddersfield. Yes, Huddersfield. You're right. You're right. Yes.
I mean, it's an insane amount of figures. With obviously the money. It just shows how clubs hemorrhage money in places where you don't see it on the pitch. You don't see it in the pockets of the staff. But equally, you want to get the best players. You have to negotiate, and these people, for whatever you think of them, have a particular role to play in the process. So you can argue, yes, have Wrexham bought wisely, invested money, paid enough, overpaid, whatever these things are. You still had to make some key decisions. You've had to put the players in at the right time. There's a lot of credit has got to go to the management team, whatever happens, because this season has been way above and beyond what any of us genuinely thought that they would do immediately off promotion. There was ambition and hope and all of that, but I also thought there'd be a lot of other clubs who were doing the same thing. So the fact that Wrexham have achieved it, somebody in the management deserves a lot of praise. Could be boardroom, could be ownership, probably but the manager himself. So yeah, he should be on the list.
Or Rockin' Robin, thanks to him.
I mean,
From behind the scenes, maybe.
yeah, definitely.
The appeals body met last week to assess and consider appeals submitted as a result of the first instance body decisions made for the UEFA and Tier 1 women's club licences on 27th of March 2025. The FAW received an appeal from Wrexham, who were refused their Tier 1 women's club licence. This meant the possibility that Wrexham Women could have been relegated from the Adran Premier, as a Tier 1 licence is required to compete. Wrexham were successful in their appeal and have been granted their Tier 1 licence for the 2025-26 season. So Wrexham Women have been granted both the Tier 1 and UEFA Women's licence for 2025-26, which they need to play in European competitions should they win the league next year. Fingers crossed, let's hope. Daz, were you surprised Wrexham Women failed their licence and had to appeal?
I mean, I mean, obviously, this is a level of football governance that doesn't really, I don't know, do any of us understand how this system works. But you'd think that a club of this scale, with the resources it's got available to it, the advice and the support that it gets in terms of club management, you'd like to think that all of these things are in place and sufficient. So, what is the criteria that the UEFA are measuring this by? I have no idea, um, and it's it beggars belief that a big club. I mean, Wrexham is a big club. Should fall even remotely short of whatever that criteria is, and it can't be to do with resources. It can't be to do with personnel. I mean, it's incredibly well run and has plenty to offer. So it just can't be. I have no idea what the criteria is that they failed on, and certainly what their appeal was arguing against.
I mean, there are a number of things that Tier 1 looks at. It looks at, like you say, the paperwork and making sure that everything's in place from everything from making sure that all the staff are fully trained and have all their certificates and have done all their licenses and have all their everything up to date, they have the insurances, they have all the backup on the medical side, but also it's to do with the infrastructure. So it's to do with the training facilities, it's to do with the ground, and there are some who have speculated that it could be something to do with the rock and the fact the rock maybe is falling down. We're not quite sure from that point of view. But yeah, I mean, thankfully, Jamie, is it good news? Well, I'll ask Daz and both of you. Is it good news that they've got that Tier 1? Because it could have been an absolute disaster, couldn't it, if the appeal hadn't have happened, because Wrexham could have been relegated back to the Adran North.
Is that a serious question? Is it good news? No, it's shit news. No.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get what I mean. I get what you mean. I mean, obviously, there's two parts to it, isn't it? It's like the UEFA bit, which you need to have in order to be able to go and play in Europe should you have won the league anyway. So, okay, so there was a part of this that was only going to be a problem if they won the title, which okay, so that wasn't for this year, but it is going to be moving forward the ambition of the club. So they have to make sure that that's in place. But the Tier 1, as I understand it, it just gives them the right to be eligible for that first tier division status, and we've seen quite a few clubs historically who should have been promoted, both the men and the women, but particularly in the men historically that I'm familiar with. They've won their league and weren't promoted because they didn't have the right licensing, or it's usually to do with stadium. It's usually to do with the fact that they don't have. So it's an interesting one. That if you think it's, I mean, I hadn't thought about the Rock, because I always thought the Rock was a pretty, I was going to say solid stadium, but it's the Rock. I felt that's the wrong thing to say. But that's a setup that is more than capable, suitable. I've seen the men's game played there and stuff like that. So it's obviously, it's got to be lots of different layers to this, and they're not all there out in the public domain really. But yeah, you would think though that a club like Wrexham would have been aware of what those standards were, whatever that measurement, that level you've got to reach has to be in order to qualify. They would have done their due diligence and would have said the Rock is suitable. If not, they'd be playing somewhere else. They would. I know this is bone of contention for the men's game, but obviously you've got the Kairos as well. Now, a lot of the other clubs play, men and women all play at their one ground. They only have the one ground and they have to share it. And I don't know what. Go on.
You
go on, Jay.
wonder. I was just gonna say, you wonder whether that's that's what's happened behind the scenes for him to get this appeal. Has there been some sort of an issue with the Rock? And the way the club have managed to get a successful appeal is they've said, look, from next season, the women will be playing at the Kairos. When just haven't announced it yet.
I mean, if you look at some of, some of the other grounds that have been awarded the license outright and didn't have to appeal it. So we're talking about the places like Cardiff Met. Now I know they're an international training facility and school for elite athletes in Wales. But their ground is, I mean, we're just talking about the pitch, fine, but the result, the rest of the resources around them, I wouldn't say it's club, stadium appropriate. It's just a training pitch at the best of times. Pontypridd is a good old fashioned pitch, but I can't see how any of these clubs necessarily stand out ahead of Wrexham, other than the fact that they all play at their own ground. So maybe that's it. Maybe as simple as that. There's more choice, though. Of course, there's a lot more choice up in Wrexham for grounds that you could potentially play at. But whether or not they also make that Tier 1 license, I guess you got Connors Quay and
Queensway.
In fact, I think it's probably only Connors Quay. You'd have to ground share with something like Connors Quay or something.
Airbus, maybe. I think Airbus will also qualify. I think. Not quite sure.
Right. I mean, they obviously. I don't think they've not gone for their license yet because they don't have a team that requires it, I suppose. But the ground probably is. You're probably right. But there's some historical clubs up there like your Hills, Llandudno, and if you're prepared to travel, I have concerns for your fan base that if you're trying to build the game up in Wrexham, you don't want to be having to have your home games too far away. Bangor's a weird one because obviously they've just reformed and with the new ground and stuff. So, I mean,
they played at Central Park last week in Denbigh. I mean, maybe that's an option. Who knows?
Well, because we've got grounds being used for international games for these tournaments that are coming up as well. So they've got to meet a certain criteria to be able to host those UEFA youth tournament games.
Yeah.
So any of those grounds is going to have met those standards. So let's hope it is just ground rather than Wrexham governance. But if you've got the governance in place for the men's game, there should be no excuse for the women's game being equal and appropriate. So let's hope it's that more than the other.
Brown and knobbly, not potatoes, but Jamie's head. Must be time for the chip shop. The cooking fat only has a few more fries left in it, but we're going to eke out as much as we can as we head towards the end of the season. So first into the fryer tonight, it's Bristol Rovers. The final pages for the 2024-25 story draws to a close as the Easter break signals two massive games in close succession that could decide Wrexham's fate. Good Friday sees the Stoke Kairos welcoming the Gas, Bristol Rovers, for game 43 of the season. Wrexham and Bristol Rovers last met just before Christmas, where they managed a 1-1 draw, Wrexham's goal by Elliot Lee. Bristol Rovers had sacked Matt Taylor as manager just before the Wrexham game, and at the time, coach David Horseman was in charge for that draw. Not long after the game, they appointed ex-Brighton under-18s manager Inigo Calderon as permanent manager. Since taking over, he's struggled to get the results required, and Bristol Rovers have sunk into the relegation zone, currently 21st, with 12 wins, 6 draws and 24 losses, a goal difference of -26 and 42 points. In there, on goal difference, just from Burton Albion. They have the worst form record in the league currently, and their last 5 results: a 1-0 loss away at Crawley Town, a 2-1 loss at home to Mansfield Town, a 2-1 loss at home to Birmingham City, a 1-0 loss away at Bolton Wanderers, and a 2-1 loss at home to Exeter City. And the chips are done. Jamie, Bristol Rovers in town haven't won a game since the 11th of March. Let me say that again. Haven't won a game since the 11th of March, but haven't been walloped by teams either. Surely Wrexham can play better than they did last Saturday and get a result, can't they?
You had to say it, didn't you?
Yeah.
You had to say it. Yeah, they got the worst in the league at the minute. Yeah. Look, I'm totally chilled about this game. I'm absolutely fine with it. Don't worry. All I can say is, as I go into the ground, I am going to find the nearest defibrillator just so I know where it is. Yeah, on paper, and this is becoming another one of our pod catchphrases. On paper, it's a Wrexham win all day, isn't it? But who knows? You know, the problem we've got is that our home form, while still very good on the whole, has been a little bit more sporadic this season than previous couple of years. You know, as we've talked about to death, the style of football we're playing, you know, we're not blowing teams away anymore. But based on the fact of, if nothing else, their league position, their recent run of performances and results, and the fact that, you know, despite everything we've spoken about Wrexham and our poor performances, or not as dynamic performances recently, you know, we're unbeaten in what, 5 now, is it?
Something like
5 or
that.
6?
Something like
You know, so you have to say a Rex. You know, you have to say the expectation for this is a Wrexham win. But as a side, this it maybe sounds a little bit extreme, but for me, this one goes down as a must-win game. Of the 4 we have remaining, this is a must-win. You know, I've got a slightly different opinion on the Blackpool game because it's away from home and the form they're in. But based on the form Bristol are in, where they're at in the league, where we're at in the league, what we're trying to do, the fact that we're at home, this is a must-win game. We have to win this game. You know, if we, it maybe sounds a bit extreme. If we don't win this game, then we don't deserve to go up, because you can't afford to drop points against this kind of opposition.
Daz, nothing is more dangerous than a team in the relegation zone needing a result. Exactly what Bristol Rovers have. They need the result on Saturday. Should Wrexham be cautious?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. They're gonna Bristol are absolutely going to be trying their damnedest, because you know they are down there with not, you know, then they're amongst a whole bunch of teams that are all sort of fishing around that 42 to 47, 48 sort of. So any team from, you know, well, actually, you know, it's still not over for Cambridge and Crawley, really, if you want to be honest. But you know, from Bristol all the way up to sort of Peterborough, that is tight. And any one of those teams, a win for them, suddenly you're moving about significantly. So they know what a win could do for them. Of course, they're not going to be naive. They're trying to play Wrexham at the Kairos, with what's at stake for Wrexham is going to be an easy game. But you, if we're going to say Bristol, going to, you know, like I say, you're looking at their run of form there, 5 defeats in a row. You'd think they've been trying to break that run of poor defeats, poor results already, and yet they're not achieving it. So there's some things not right there. And whether it's the mindset and the attitude of the players, whether it's the fact that their management changes, has been changed. I You know, we watched them play. They weren't a brilliant team, but they weren't awful. But there was passages of play at the end of the game against Wrexham, in the away game, you know, where you could see some decent play. They kept Wrexham under the cosh last time around. I think this is a slightly different feel about it. I think the run of, you know, these results just don't bode well. Luckily for Bristol, everybody else is losing around them. So Crawley lost, Cambridge lost, Shrewsbury obviously pretty much out of it. So it didn't help them that Burton won their last game, and it's got a game in hand. So you know, so there's arguably, maybe, you know, they're on 45 compared to Bristol's 42. So I then they are not going to roll over without a fight, but I'm not sure they know how to put a strong performance together at the moment. It just seems that they're wayward, and so Wrexham have to make the most of this opportunity. And if anything, you know, we may find that goal difference is going to come to play in that race for second and third between yourselves and Wickham. It could easily come down to goal difference, and at the moment Wickham have the superior goal difference. So any kind of numbers you can put against a team like Bristol who are struggling. Once you've got a couple, you've got to go for it. You've got to get in there. And but can they do it? We've just been talking about their lack of firepower up front. The strikers not really putting the numbers. I mean, we've had that one game recently. What was it? 3. That's about the first time we scored 3 in a bit, isn't it? So it's not something that is. There's no indicators that that's the thing that's going to happen. But this is your chance. This is definitely the chance to put some, proper daylight between you and Wickham.
I don't think it helps the fact that Calderon talked about his Bristol Rovers being a League Two club apparently this week in the press, which is probably not the right thing to do, to be brutally honest. Jamie, as we said before earlier, 6 games now, an unchanged starting 11. Expecting that to be game 7 on Friday?
Yeah, I am, because it's Parky's way, isn't it? And like I say, he's the one that's tasked with picking the team and setting the team up and ultimately getting the results. I'm certainly not in a position to say he's wrong. Like every other fan, I've got my own opinion. I think all I was calling out from the performance against Wickham was looking at it objectively and how poorly we performed and how kind of lethargic
Wickham
we
or
looked.
Wigan?
Wigan, sorry, against Wigan, sorry, my bad. Looking how kind of lethargic and poor we were in that game, I think it's fair to ask the question about whether the likes of McLean, Matty James, Dobson, Rodriguez, and I could keep going. You could keep going through the whole 11 because it's been unchanged. You have to ask yourself the question, or it's fair to ask the question: is fatigue playing having an impact? I'd love to see him freshen it up, because I think freshening it up means that it means you could potentially change the impetus of the game, i.e., you could go at it with a different approach. But I think we've learnt now, haven't we? That's not his style. That's not how he plays. Not how he does it. As much as I would love to see us set up at home, like we said against Burton, at home against a team who is in crap form, struggling for a win, in a dogfight for relegation. Based on Burton's recent form, you'd say at the minute Burton are favourites to probably staying up over Bristol. We're at home, 4 games to go. You'd hope the crowd's going to be up for it. This for me is a ripe opportunity to put a more offensive, attack-minded, aggressive team and performance out there. But I just don't expect him to do that, because that's not what he does. So, in answer to your question, I would genuinely be flabbergasted if there were wholesale changes. Well, maybe 1 or 2, but even that would surprise me, because if that 11 are sort of physically fit to start, I expect that's what he will go with.
But are we considering the fact that we have another game then 3 days later? Does that play into the fact that, well, maybe we should rest players against Bristol Rovers?
Yeah, but was it? It wasn't that long ago, was it? When was it? Let me just bring our fixtures up. It wasn't that long ago where we had a game Saturday, Tuesday, and it was the same 11. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's just 3 days in between. Well, 2 days, 2 and a bit days in between. It's the same thing. I suppose there is that age-old question of, well, they're professional athletes, and regardless of what age they are, etc., they should be, at the peak performance, and they should be able to play 2 games of football in 3 days. But it doesn't work like that, does it? And at the end of the day, the other thing which we're not privy to is obviously Parky's got all the personal statistics off them, because they're all GPSed up, aren't they? They're all monitored, and to see what their kind of oxygen levels are like and all that jazz. So he'll have access to all that as well. So as much as we think he is stubborn, because that's a lot, some of the decisions he makes, it makes him look stubborn. But as much as that may be what our perception is of him, you would also like to think he is not going to jeopardize a game of football or a possible promotion through being stubborn. If the performances of Jay Rodriguez and the stats all say that he's he's on his last legs and he can't start a game, you would hope he would make the right call of putting somebody else in. But I don't know. I'm not, that's just one example. I know we talked about him before, but
yeah, but his Fitbit
yeah.
says he does do 10,000 steps. So Jay Rodriguez definitely should stay in the team.
Yeah, I just we can only go on what we've seen so far, and my gut feeling is if that 11 are fit to play, start the game, he will start the game, and I think and I don't envisage it being any different on Monday. As crazy as that sounds, given that we've spoken at length this year about how deep and how good our quality of our squad is, yet we are relying on the same 11 players at. The big thing for this game against Bristol, we need apart from the fact we absolutely need a win. The biggest thing from this is we need a response, don't we? It was clear to see for the 4,500 travelling fans and for every other supporter who watched that game, and every neutral or everybody that watched that game, it was clear to see it was a terribly poor performance for a team that is fighting for an automatic promotion. And we need a response. We need to see a response to give us all a bit of encouragement, because at the moment it feels like we're kind of clinging on by our fingernails at the minute, and we kind of could do with a bit of a boost for all of us. If we can put in a decent performance on the pitch and hopefully get a good result, that's going to make the crowd electric. That's going to then light the touch paper on the atmosphere in the stadium. The players hopefully can then feed off that going into the next monumental game on Monday.
I mean, Daz, looking at the performance on Saturday, we both know that as you get to this part of the season, every side is basically running with a load of injuries. Some are serious injuries where the players can't play, but some players are playing with injuries. Do you think that's a factor in Wrexham's case here? Outlining the fact that he's using the same 11, the performances that we saw on Saturday. Do you think there is a potential injury problem within the squad?
What? So as a reason for not choosing those other players who are on the bench, you mean?
Well, more to do with the performances, really, with regards to why, because the performance on Saturday was quite lethargic, and there didn't seem a lot of energy, and yet these players had all had a week off. I mean, are injuries starting to play a part, as they do with every side?
Yeah, no, I don't think he'd risk. I don't think he'd risk players if they were carrying one of those kind of injuries. I just don't think he's that kind of manager. But I don't know what I'm basing that on. I've just not seen that myself. I think if they're carrying a genuine injury, they won't be being picked. But I think for as long as they are, well, they'll get picked. I think in terms of squads, with players coming back from fitness, because don't forget, it's there are plenty of clubs who lose players at key parts of the season, and then they come back near the end, and they're trying to get some match fitness before the end of the season. So there's a whole range of timings for fitness. But I think if you've got say the same 11 playing week in week out, there's no way they can keep that kind of grueling sort of schedule up if they're carrying injuries. So that's absolutely fine. If you've got injuries on your bench and they're not being shared and divulged, and that's the reason why they're not being rotated, that's got to be something to be said about the training, or about the medical or whatever. But no, I'm not sure. I think it's familiarity, it's systems currently working as well as he hopes they can, and the players that currently occupy the team first 11 are the ones who know that system best. And for me, they're just going to keep acting out those strategies, those plans, using the players who implement them correctly and as successfully as he wants them to be. I think that's why they're in the team. I can't see it being about injuries.
I do get the feeling that unless Rodriguez's head is hanging off, he's going to get picked. But there you go. Jamie, Stoke Ras hasn't been the impregnable fortress it has been in previous years. How important is it going to be on Friday?
Yeah, crucial, isn't it? I think the stadium, the stadium can be a powerful force, but positively and negatively. We've witnessed it over the last couple of years where there are certain atmospheres, certain times and certain games where the atmosphere has been absolutely unbelievable. And to be a player on that pitch must make you feel about 10 foot tall. But then likewise, there have also been a lot of occasions where the game haven't really gone our way. And then because there are so many people in attendance, the air of let's call it nervousness can escalate and can amplify, and I guess that has an impact on players as well. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, oh, get the old war paint on, Braveheart style, and say, come on, get behind them. But as much as I won't boo and I won't jeer my own team or anything like that, Christ, you sat next to me. I get as frustrated as anybody, and unfortunately, sometimes that can be a case of me sitting there and like, but if you imagine you've got a few thousand people all doing something similar in unison, that creates a murmur of like negativity, and that can have an impact as well. So I know last week was frustrating. I really do know it's frustrating, and I'm not the crowd police. I'm not going to get on anybody's back about, oh, make sure you stand up and sing and take your shirt off and swing it over your head. And I'm
Please
not
don't
getting
do that.
into all that jazz. You go. Oh no, I did it once and nearly knocked myself out with my tits. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not going to have a go at anybody. You go to the game and you enjoy it and you get as involved as you want. That's your right. But I think what is important is that we probably all do have a responsibility to how we can affect what's happening on the pitch. And I know it's a bit of a circle, it's a cycle, because our mood and our kind of involvement in the game is driven by what's happening on the pitch. If we're witnessing terrible football that's got nothing that's getting us excited, and then it's hard to get yourself excited, if that makes sense, at the football. So yeah, it's we've got 2 home games left. This is the penultimate home game, and never more has the crowd been, is being crucial. Is going to be crucial than it is going to be on Friday. So, let's hope we get a decent performance on the pitch, and then that transfers into the crowd, and the lucky ones who are getting to go to Blackpool on Monday can go in good voice.
So time for the salt, vinegar and sauce core. Jamie, you'll be in the tech end on Friday, so good luck with that, because I don't think you've been in there for a while. What's your score prediction for Wrexham versus Bristol Rovers?
Will I? I thought that was TBC. I thought we were going to play rock, paper, scissors.
I don't mind going if you want. I thought you wanted to go.
No, I thought you said you wanted to go. Anyway, we'll discuss that later.
I've not been for years.
Yeah, we'll discuss it later. Yeah. Yeah. So score. I'm going to be sensible this week. There's
5-0.
My Braveheart, says 4-0, but I'm going to go for a 2-0 Wrexham win.
Daz, what's your score prediction for Wrexham versus Bristol Rovers?
I had 2 scores written down. One of them was 2-0. So, in the interests of competitive, I'm going to go 1-0 Wrexham.
Well, if you're going to win the league, mate, you might as well do it the way you've done it all season. So, absolutely. And I'm predicting Wrexham 3, Bristol Rovers 0. Simple statement.
Oh.
If we can't beat this team at home, we don't deserve to go up. So, quick, decisive win, move on, and try not to wake me up in the Wrexham Lager stand or the tech end doing it. So
I will. If we're 2-0 up and we score a third, just to go back to what I was saying about how important the crowd is, I will be booing.
So let's wrap those chips up to keep them warm. And next into the fryer, it's Blackpool. Three days later, Deadpool meets Blackpool as Wrexham take a trip to the Lancashire coast on Easter Monday in a tricky game at the seaside. These two teams last met at the racecourse between Christmas and New Year on a very foggy Thursday, where Wrexham won 2-1. A superb self-volley from Paul Mullin and a penalty from Stephen Fletcher. Since that game, Blackpool under ex-Manchester United player Steve Bruce have slowly improved, currently sitting in 10th in the table with 15 wins, 15 draws and 11 losses, a goal difference of plus 10 and 60 points, 9 points from a playoff place. Their last 5 league results: a 2-1 loss at home to Leyton Orient, a 2-0 win away at Northampton Town, a 2-1 win at home to Bolton, a 3-0 win at home to Reading, and a 2-1 loss away at Rotherham United. And the chips are done. Jamie, a tough away game. Will this be make or break in Wrexham season?
Before I answer the question, I am going to unapologetically use this platform for a selfish purpose. I have put a request out on Twitter, and I'm only going to put one out. I'm not going to beg. But if anybody does know of 2 tickets for this game, please get in touch, because I will happily take them off your hands. I unfortunately wasn't one of the ones who had access to the super secret code to allow me to get tickets for this game. So and obviously my brother and colleague over here, he must have one finger up at the director's bottom, because he seems to get away tickets no problem.
Oh, hang on. There's a message here from a P. Mullin saying he can get you one if you want. Apparently, he can get into the away end anyway he wants. So,
listen, if he can get me 2 tickets, I'll cup his balls. No problem. Yeah, no, I know it's a bit off piece, but like I say, just if anybody that genuinely, and you know, I know there's lots of people who are in the same boat, and that's fair dues. But if you don't ask, you don't get. But yeah, if you know of 2 tickets, let me know. Yeah, this is. I mean, these 2 games over the Easter weekend, you know, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's make or break. I think we'll have a good idea by the end of Monday where we're at. You know, you would hope that we've had a good result on Friday, and then obviously we're going to get to this game. Now, I was and I am still nervous about this game, because I think this is of the 2 over Easter, this is and it's obviously you know, again, on paper, the most difficult one because of their position in the league, and their recent results have been better than they've been bad. The only sort of saving grace, I think, is the fact that they lost their last game, because they lost their last game to Stevenage. No, they didn't. They lost their last game to. Did they lose their last game to Rotherham? That was it, because they're playing Stevenage next. I think if they'd have won that game, I think they would have really tails up, thinking they could still sneak a playoff place. And I know mathematically they still can, and they've got a game in hand. I can't see them having enough in the 5 games they've got left to get in the playoffs. So selfishly, I'm hoping that result against Rotherham might have been a little bit of a kind of sit down kind of moment for them. But as we well know, and we've broken record time, whenever we go anywhere, everybody's excited. You know, it'll be a full house. They'll want to put one over on us. They'll, again, I think I said something similar when we were doing the Wigan preview last week, that they will want to get some revenge. Maybe it's too strong of a word, but it's the only word I can really think of. They'll want to get some kind of revenge for when we beat them, because I think we were fortunate to win that game. Again, that was one of those Christmas period games where we won the games, and we were very fortunate to win the games. Another late goal, I think, wasn't it? So yeah, this is, of the 2 games over Easter, this is the one that I think is the potential to cause us problems. But I kind of go back to what I said before the Wigan game last week. If you can't win it, don't lose it. And I'm not going to, as long as we beat Bristol, I'm not going to lose my shit if we draw this game. I think because, you know, I yeah.
Okay. As Jamie said, for Blackpool, the playoffs are mathematically possible, but they are erratic, to say the least. Beating Reading 3-0 and then losing 2-1 to Rotherham, very odd. Wrexham have improved their away form, but would a draw be a result here, or will Wrexham need this win?
Well, obviously, it opens the door, doesn't it? It opens the door to all the other teams around you because we keep talking about Wickham, but we mustn't forget about Stockport and teams like that as well, who will be chasing down and have got an incredible run of results recently as well. So I do think you've got to be careful not to invite the optimism, invite the potential for teams to think they can. But Blackpool, I mean, like I say, I know new management comes in and stuff like that, but they have been a very difficult team to beat. They've only lost a couple of games, and even if you go right to the very beginning of the year, they draw against Birmingham, but then they also then went and drew against Shrewsbury the following week, or 3 days later. So they, they they are known to be erratically, but they are winning more than they're not at the moment, and that's what's allowed them to catch up, close the gap on whatever, on potentially a playoff place for them. But it's it's really difficult to say because the game against Rotherham, it looks like they lost that game in the last minute. It was a late goal after a sending off. So is that an indicative? Is that an indicator of what they've been like? Probably not. I think the 3-0 against Reading, 2-1 against Bolton, they're the results that kind of show what this team potentially can be. They'll have had a slightly. I mean, there's no easy games in this league, but Stevenage, you would think they should be able to compete against, even though they're away. In the same way, unlike yourselves, where you've got Bristol Rovers at home, so you have to win that one because you're at home. Blackpool are away against Stevenage and probably will win, but it's going to be a tough, So coming into this one, I think Blackpool are going to be the really difficult team to beat. I really do think there's going to be not a lot in it. Of course, you want to. I'm not going to say you have to win it, but you don't want to keep inviting the other also rans to think they can leapfrog you right at the last minute. So keeping the pressure on them as much as anything. You've got to keep putting in some results, and you've got performances so you get the results.
So time for the salt vinegar and sauce score. Daz, what's your score prediction for Blackpool versus Wrexham?
I've struggled with this one. I've written the same score twice, but in different versions. I'm not even entertaining the draw on this one. I do think it's going to be a 1-0. Yay! I can't. I wrote. I should just go with my gut instinct of what I thought. Looking at the form book, I am going to regrettably say Blackpool 1, Wrexham 0.
Jamie, what's your score prediction for Blackpool versus Wrexham?
Can't you give me your score prediction first?
Of course I can, if you want. And I'm predicting Blackpool 2, Wrexham 1. Cat amongst the pigeons. But after sitting through that Wigan game, I think Wrexham will struggle against a side that likes to score goals, but also is a bit leaky at the back. Wrexham may have to go into score one more mode than you, but I think this will trip us up, as we'll have to hope other sides around us do the same. So I predicted Blackpool 2, Wrexham 1.
Okay, so much like Wrexham season, this could be make or break for my Chip Shot League season.
Yep.
I'm going to go. I think Blackpool will score because looking at their results, they score more than they don't. But I think we're going to put on a show on a donkey. 2-1 to Wrexham.
So let's wrap those chips up to keep them warm. And we'll be reviewing these games in next week's pod.
Come and see the Reds with me, and you will swear that you have seen a vision. We know just how they feel when they beat me by McNeil. We're off to the second division.
As we say goodbye to Mike Berry, the last main cast member of British sitcom Are You Being Served, who passed away this week, I say, are you free, Mr. James?
I'm free.
Thank you. I was waiting for it. You've been listening to the Eat More Chips podcast, the official podcast, one of the greatest Welsh supporters flags in the universe. If you have enjoyed listening to us, please support the podcast, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You can find us on audio at Spotify, Apple, and YouTube Music. You can also go into our social media, such as X, Threads, and Blue Sky, at Tweet More Chips, or drop us an email, eatmorechipspodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, Eat More Chips Podcast, and on Facebook, search for the Eat More Chips Podcast group. You can leave us a review if the platform you're listening on lets you do so, and if you have anything particularly you'd like us to discuss, please feel free to drop us a line. Our thanks as always to the North Wales folk band The Harvesters and their 1978 Wrexham football song. Don't forget the gentleman who won last week's giveaway, which was Dave Wood 4118. You still haven't got in touch with us, so please get in touch with us so we can find out where to send the shirts.
Please get in touch with us, David, because if you don't, we'll have to use that stupid, shitty wheel again.
If there were two people who deserve to be in a sitcom, it's my two colleagues. If anyone looks like Lou and Andy from Little Britain, it's these two. So, thank you, Daz.
I don't know who's going to be which there, but I'll tell. Yes, you're welcome. But I'm
And Jamie's the one in the wheelchair.
okay.
And thank you, Jamie.
What that one? That's him, isn't it?
You're right. He's got that one. He's got that one.
Yeah. Come on, Wrexham. Come on.
I've been Welsh Techie and I'm a lady. So until next time, come on, Cymru and Wrexham, and come on the town.
Come and see